Good morning. Welcome to the weekend. I hope Friday finds you well. We're beginning a journey through the book of Romans. Pastor Brandon kicked us off on this past Sunday. And so there will be several occasions throughout this series that we do a little deeper dive in these morning videos. And so Paul begins his letter to the Romans with his name, Paul. Then he identifies himself as a bondservant. The New King James translates it bondservant. The Greek word there is doulos. It doesn't appear a lot in the New Testament, and every time it does, it's referring to a person. And there's something unique about a bondservant. It's not a slave. It is, but it's not someone who is compelled into slavery against their will. Slavery was common throughout the first century. There were many people who were born into slavery, many people who found themselves in economic circumstances that forced them into slavery. There were many who were enslaved against their will, and of course we knew that in our own country's history in the 19th century and beyond. And so we thank the Lord that's not part of who we are right now. But this idea of a bondservant is very, very separate. It refers to someone who voluntarily enslaved themselves for whatever reason. And the notion of a bondservant in the text has a very unique application because it is always someone who has enslaved themselves to the Lord. Paul says he's a bondservant, meaning he voluntarily gave up all of his rights, submitted himself to the Lord. He called himself a bondservant in Galatians. He called himself a bondservant in Titus. Over and over he uses that phrase, bondservant. He's not the only one. James identified himself as a bondservant. Peter in 2 Peter did. Jude did as well. Paul mentioned in Colossians a fellow servant of God named Epaphras, and identified him as a bondservant. But here's the kicker. Are you ready for this? Paul, writing to the Philippian church in Philippians 2:7, said that Jesus humbled himself. We should be humble like he is. And Jesus became a bondservant. From the portals of glory, laid aside all of his authority to become a bondservant and suffer death for you and I, voluntarily committing himself to that role. And so there's nothing wrong with being a servant. Many times we see management as being a promotion and servanthood as being inferior. But many of these apostles and writers throughout the New Testament called themselves voluntary servants to Christ, giving up all of their rights to do whatever he called them to do. And certainly we should follow that example and do the same. Have a great Friday. Take care. God bless. If we can help you in any way through the church, don't hesitate to reach out. That's what we're here for, praying for all of those who are sick and very interested in getting to know many of those who have been visiting our church in a better way. And I hope you have a great Friday. God bless.